Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me yet again. Um, this time, I want to start. Um, I want to start by honestly saying how grateful I am that this video series has connected with as many people as it has so far. When I started doing this, um, my hope was that talking about my own journey and my own healing practice and what I've learned along the way would, at the very least, inspire or offer hope or a new perspective to at least one person. And I thought, if one person can be touched by this, then it will all have been worth it. And to my utter amazement, um, it has reached more than one person. It has reached several people, many people, in fact, and people have reached out to me uh, in gratitude for sharing this, telling me that it's met them at the right time, and um, shared with me uh, little bits of their own healing journey, and have really reinforced in me that um, when we come together as community and echo what we've learned from others, then um, we create an energetic field that resonates and ends up meeting those who are looking for the same vibration, so to speak. So I just want to say thank you for tuning in to this, and thank you for supporting me in this and for allowing me to support you. It feels like a privilege, and it feels like an honor, and I'm humbled by it, and I take none of it for granted. So, having said that, uh, last time I spoke in the last video, I talked a lot about the need to protect our own energy and how I had to learn that in order to be available to others in my life and ultimately to the world, I first had to learn the practice of maintaining the integrity, the structural integrity of my own energetic field. And I talked about a few practices that I picked up along the way that were right for me, and encouraged you um, to think about images and forms that might speak to you to help you do the same. Um, and so, on one side, what I learned was that it was really important to maintain my own positive energetic field, to not let it get dismantled, or to use a sort of an extreme term, attacked, or um, to let the integrity of it be dismantled by others' energy. But the other side of this practice I learned was that not only did I have to learn how to protect my own energy in the present moment, I also had to recognize where my own energy was being stuck in past events. And um, a large part of that learning came from one of my favorite heroes, one of my favorite teachers, who I've mentioned before. Her name is Carolyn Mace, and she talks a lot about the necessity to call back our own power, to call back our own energy, and to be very aware that that energy um, is a real substance, and that um, it affects uh, it affects the physical world and our place in it. And there's a real connection between um, our choices of words, of thoughts, of actions, the energy that those create, and the effects in the real world. So a shout out to Carolyn Mace. Oh, I think I have, yes, one of her books here that was very helpful to me, called Anatomy of the Spirit, the 7 stages of power and healing. Um, so, what I started to do was to recall the places in my life that were harboring anger, resentment, um, shame, uh, blame, and through the trajectory of my life. And I realized that I needed to start revisiting those scenarios, not to relive them, but to be able to let them go. And I say not to relive them very, very specifically because there are certain events um, that do for me that I have needed to revisit. Um, but I'm going to talk about that a little bit later when I talk about healing parts of myself, historical parts of myself. But I point to it now because if anybody out there is listening to this and has gone through extreme capital T trauma in their life, I think it's important to consider not reliving those past traumatic events without proper support. Okay? I think that's really important to know because we don't want to trigger our system in a way that it can't be then contained or calmed without the right support and surroundings. So, but what I did learn was that there were so many events in my life from the time that I was a child until now, um, where I was I was still holding on to emotions and feelings of anger, of blame, of shame toward others, and also, and this is really important, toward myself. Shame for having acted in certain ways, for having said certain things, for having thought certain things. Um, and in the process of identifying those scenarios, um, taking time each day in my ritual of slowing things down, I began to write down those scenes and then go back to them and consciously forgive the people in those situations and forgive myself for any wrongdoing that I thought I might have done, um, either to myself or to others. And in the process of releasing those moments, what I was essentially doing was almost like cutting the anchor off a rope on a ship that was holding me stuck, letting the anchor drop away, and so then calling back my energy into my own field, and just sort of think about the image of again that anchor. If I'm the ship, if I'm the boat, and each of those scenarios was a long heavy rope with an anchor attached to it. Um, Essentially, I couldn't move very much or very far in my life because I was weighed down by all those anchors, and any waves that struck me in my life would rock me. Um, and I'm being a little dramatic because I want to overemphasize the point. And the point is that each time I was able to recognize one of those scenarios that was holding my energy, that was um, keeping my energy stuck in the past, and I released it, I was calling back more movement and more power. And eventually, and this is an ongoing exercise, of course, but the practice of doing it allowed me to call back energy, which my system needs, I really believe, which my system needs in order to live harmoniously and fluidly and with proper flow. And I think I don't know that this is sort of a one and done practice. I think it's an ongoing part of being human. But I think if we're able to identify these situations where our humanness gets stuck in a situation, the more quickly we can recognize that this is happening, the more quickly we can then um, learn to reconcile it, forgive it, let it go in whatever way needs to happen, and call back our energy and our own personal power. Um, so that was step one, and it wasn't easy because uh, it meant really acknowledging times where um, I may have been hurtful to others, uh, unintentionally, of course, but times where I may have been hurtful to others and or hurtful to myself. Um, and so going through the exercise wasn't always easy, but I knew it felt right that each time I was able to um, shift out of the past and call energy back to the present, it felt like I had regained extra space in my being. Um, and what comes to mind with regard to healing is that some of you may have heard the expression, the issues are in the tissues. Well, referring to the notion that whatever we've gone through in our lives, um, specifically whatever difficult things and traumas we've gone through in our lives, um, and painful situations that involve hurt and anger and shame and sadness and resentment, our bodies, the cellular memory of our bodies, contains them and holds on to them. And so sometimes the way to move with the intention of healing is to move into those memory centers that are being held, move through them, feel them, and then let them go. And I think the feeling part seems to be important. And again, I'm just passing on what I'm picking up along the way. Um, I'm no master here. I'm taking my cues from the masters, but so far this makes sense, and it has helped me enormously. So knowing that the issues are in my tissues, I'm trying to, um, as much as possible, recognize where my tissues are holding the issues, feel them, and then let them go because they no longer belong in the present with me. They are the past. And as long as there are parts of me, and I say parts of me specifically because I'm going to talk about our parts soon, but as long as there are parts of me that are living in the past, in those moments, um, then some of my energy is also living in those past moments and are anchored there, um, making that part of my energy unavailable to me here, and hence unavailable to the full power I can have to help my ongoing healing in this physical body. Um, so that was step one. Um, Step two happened when I was embarking on training to become a life coach, and a lot of the training was informed by a modality called internal family systems. And if you don't know what internal family systems or IFS is, um, it's a modality that was created, I think, maybe about 40 years ago by Dr. Richard Schwartz. And just very briefly, the idea is that uh, each of us has a core, authentic self, a part of us that is always whole, that is always clear, that is always compassionate, that is centered and, again, completely authentic. And what happens to us through our lives is that when situations arise that are painful, or where we are hurt, or we are feeling shamed, um, then other parts of ourselves activate in order to protect us. So let me think of an easy example. Um, Here, I think this is one that's used fairly often. If if I happen to be a child, and as a child I was abandoned by parental figures, um, then I might, um, in later years as an adult, whenever a situation presented itself to be in an intimate relationship, a part of myself might fear that that intimacy might result in me being abandoned. And so, in order to protect my system from that pain, that part will say, no, I'm going to protect Jeff. I'm going to step in and I'm going to somehow sabotage this relationship so that he doesn't have to feel the pain of abandonment. So that's one example. And what happens over time is that as these parts come up, here's another example. This is actually a real one from my life. Having been a gay person, um, growing up in the early 80s, mid 80s, when I had fabulous hair and listening to Duran Duran and all the others, um, it was a time where the AIDS crisis was at its highest. I was just coming into myself as a gay adolescent and feeling extremely unsafe. And there were no role models around, as there are today, to say, oh, am I coining this? Gay is okay? Well, gay is more than okay, but um, there were no role models around. Um, and, and so I felt a strong sense of shame because I couldn't talk about it with anyone. I had to hide this part of me. And so um, the part of me that jumped in or became activated to protect me was the part that said, you need to hide your gayness at all costs. Otherwise, it'll be worse. And so I learned to act as straight as I could. I learned to not cross my legs while sitting in a way that might look feminine. Um, I was very conscious of how I spoke. Um, and so as I got older, um, I had to then visit the younger part of me that initiated um, the protecting of myself, the one that said, "No, you're not gonna do anything that might resemble anything gay in your life." I had to somehow make friends with that part that was trying to protect me, so that I could go back to the part of me that had been exiled, the one that knew that he was gay, bring healing to him, bring healing to that part of me, and so release him of the burden that he has been carrying my whole life, and free him of that burden, and then also release the part of me that was protecting my system by saying, don't show who you are. And in that exercise, um, I freed up all of this energy that was stuck in my life. And so that was a very long story. I thank you for sticking with me through it. But that's just one example of how internal family systems means that we are at the core a whole being, but that we have a multiplicity of parts that surface in our life to protect us from difficult situations. And the goal then is to bring healing to those parts of us that need healing and free up our energy from the past so that we can make it available to us in the present. Um, in our physical healing, in our emotional healing, in our psychological healing, um, and in our spiritual healing. And as we do that more and more, our system, our energetic system, begins to trust and have confidence in our core true self to navigate our life from that place. And so, um, my coaching practice that was very informed by IFS, by internal family systems. Internal family systems. Here's a reference. The book is called No Bad Parts by Richard Schwartz. The internal family systems model, if anybody wants to explore that a little bit more deeply. and get a sense of what I was talking about. Um, and so, okay, just a quick recap. The last video I talked about protecting our energy system. Now I've mentioned two things. The first is being aware of situations where I had been harboring anger or resentment, frustration, and consciously doing the work to let those things go so that I could call back my energy into my system. Um, and then a deeper part of that, or a different part of that, that I began to learn about was this idea of knowing that there were parts of myself historically that had become frozen in time at difficult times, and that I needed to bring healing to them to let them know that it was safe and to be fully active in the world. And then again, bring even more healing energy and more flow into my system so that I was operating in harmony. Uh, and I say all this because I am convinced that the more that we can be aware of how our energy is feeling, the more that we can uh, ride it like a wave and participate as a companion in our own flow so that we can bring healing to the emotional parts of us, the psychological parts of us that then have influence over the physical parts of us. Because as you know, if you've watched these videos, again, the title, Informed, okay, comes from the idea that we are literally forming um, our incarnate self, our physical self, through what we're bringing in from the invisible realm. And the invisible realm you can think of simply as your thoughts, your ideas, your memories, your emotions. Um, Informed, the matter of spirit. And of course, what I mean by that is um, one, that our spirits matter, but also the matter, the physical matter of our spirit is influenced by the way that we choose to participate in our being. And here, choice becomes really important to think about um, because, again, um, Carolyn Mace, I can never pronounce her name right. I'm sorry. Carolyn, if you ever hear this, which I doubt you will, but please accept my apologies for mispronouncing your last name over and over again. I believe it is Carolyn Mace. Um, to paraphrase her, she says something to the effect of, we need to choose to live in a way that constantly recharges our energy system. And what I take from that is that when we can create the space between our desire to react to the world, create a space so that we can then go inward, recognize how we want to be and become, and then respond from there. We are literally holding the paddles, the oars in our hand, and paddling along with the current that our soul wants to provide for us. We're no longer just reacting to the world. We're choosing to cooperate with the world in a way that feels right to the call of our soul, to the call of our spirit. And the ways, some of the ways that we can do that, I think, are by being conscious of our thoughts. And again, this is all, at least for me, this is challenging stuff because we're we're human beings. We're human, and that's the messy part, because we're human and we're affected by stuff. But we're also beings, and we're not human doings, right? We don't exist just to um, fulfill um, our personality, uh, our jobs, our genders. Um, we're human beings, and so if we can learn to practice how we be, I know that's bad English, but I think you know what I mean. If we can learn to practice how we participate in our being, then we help our systems to live in alignment with our souls. And I really believe that that contributes to our ability to heal ourselves. And so becoming aware of creating space to think about my thoughts. Oh, I just had a negative thought about someone. Ah, but I recognize that now. Let me correct that. Creating the space to think about the words that I use as I speak myself into the world. Um, Create the space to think about my actions or my deeds in the world, so that any way that I recognize that I can participate in life as life in harmony with the rest of life helps me to stay in touch with the flow of my own power, my own energy, be in alignment with it, honor it, flow with it, and make choices in my life that um, help me to know when um, when I'm giving away my energy, or when I'm calling it back, or simply holding it where it needs to be. Uh, that was okay. So here's a great example. What I just did was I paused for what some people might call dead air time. And for me, in that moment, I needed to take that pause to think about what I wanted to say next. But there's a part of me that knows that felt really uncomfortable doing it, because a part of me fears that anyone who's watching is going to think, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But I know that that subtle voice comes from somewhere else, and that it just jumped in to protect me, to say, you better say something to fill in the space, or people are going to think you're nuts, or that you don't know what you're doing. And through internal family systems, now I've learned to recognize a moment like this and say, okay, well, maybe when I'm off camera later, I can do a practice where I try to tune into that part of me and recognize at what point that part felt like it needed to activate in my life to protect me. In other words, at what moment did something happen in my life where I thought somebody's going to think I'm nuts if I don't say something that I think they want to hear? Um, so I'm grateful for that pause, which ended up being such an interesting thing, because I paused to work out what I wanted to say, but what I actually wanted to say was uh, having to do with the awkwardness of the pause itself. Well, that's just the beauty of this divine life. Um, the next thing that I would like to touch into, I think in the next video, is how I had to also learn to recognize when my energy was being diminished through making choices out of fear and not joy. So I'm going to save that. But again, what I want to highlight before I sign off this time is that uh, we are more than we think we are. We are certainly more than we are taught we are, at least in Western culture, and that each of us is connected to a deeper reality that when we tap into it and cooperate with it and recognize that we have the ability to flow with it, in tune with it, um, we can open space and pathways within our interior, inner dimension where our souls can flow in with their unique voices to each of us. And with careful listening, we can attune to those voices, those whispers, those intuitions, and choose to live in accordance with what our core true selves um, want for us as unique expressions of life in this world. Um, I believe that healing is possible. I also want to say that healing isn't just physical healing, it's also emotional healing, spiritual healing, psychological healing, but they're all intertwined and they support one another. And maybe this is the right time for me to say that if anybody out there who's listening would like to explore any of this stuff one-on-one, I do have a one-on-one practice. And if anybody ever wanted to reach me to learn more about that or to talk about what you're going through or to have me accompany you in any healing capacity, then please feel free to reach out to me. My name is Jeff Golf. I don't know if I've ever said that. My last name is Golf, like the sport. So if you Google Jeff Golf, you're going to get a lot of golf stuff, but you might not get this. But my coaching website is called insideoutlifecoach.ca. Insideoutlifecoach.ca. Inside out, one word. And you can just connect with me there. And I also want to say to that, that eventually I do plan to change the name from life coach to healing coach. Wellness coach was just taken up by every single person in the internet universe. But if I can help anyone on their healing journey, please don't hesitate to reach out. And with that, I thank you for being with me yet again. I send you love and I offer you blessings, and I hope that this serves. God bless. All the best.